Fearproof Face. Rewiring Your Reactions When Confronted by Threat, by Strikey Roy. Copyright 2026 by Strikey Roy. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the author. The information in this book is provided for general informational purposes only. While every effort has been made to ensure accuracy at the time of publication, the content is not intended as a substitute for professional advice, guidance, or services. The author and publisher make no representations or warranties regarding the completeness, accuracy, or applicability of the information provided. Any reliance placed on this material is strictly at the reader's own risk. Readers are encouraged to seek appropriate professional advice before making decisions based on the contents of this book. The author and publisher disclaim all liability for any loss, damage, or disruption caused by the use or application of the information herein. Preface. When I began sketching the ideas that became Fearproof Face, I did not set out to write a book about facial micro-movements or the neurobiology of fear. I started with a question that felt urgent and simple. Why do so many capable, thoughtful people freeze, apologize, or shrink at moments that matter? Over the years, that question pulled me into unexpected places, into labs where we measured tiny muscle shifts, into rooms where leaders practiced public presence, and into quiet conversations with people who felt their life choices were being shaped by other people's moods. This book is the map of that journey, and the practical guide I wish I had when I first noticed how much the face gives away before the mind can decide. The first clear insight came from a lab session where we watched video frames slowed down and saw how a single micro-expression could change the energy of a room. A quick tightening at the mouth, a brief dart of the eyes, a subtle quickening of pace, and the listener would lean away or fill the silence with reassurance. Those tiny signals felt like the brain's fast lane, a route that bypasses conscious thought and lands us in survival mode. Once I understood the mechanism, the possibility opened up. If these signals are automatic, they can also be retrained. That became the central promise of Fearproof Face. Change what you show, and you can change how your brain interprets threat, and then change what you do next. Along the way, I met people who challenged my assumptions, in good ways. A school principal who learned to hold her expression while negotiating a difficult parent and found the meeting stayed calm rather than escalating. A young lawyer who practiced pacing and pacing pauses in front of a mirror and discovered that confidence felt less like pretending and more like a muscle she could strengthen. I also made mistakes. Early attempts at training felt mechanical or inauthentic, and I learned to remove anything that sounded like a mask. The work had to preserve the person underneath, not bury them. That lesson shaped every exercise you will find in this book. The goal is not to manufacture a persona, it is to give your inner authority a reliable channel to show up. Research matters, but so does plain practice. Fearproof Face blends neurobiology with step-by-step micro-practices because knowledge without rehearsal does not change automatic responses. You will see explanations about circuits, about how the amygdala and prefrontal cortex interact when someone feels threatened. You will also find short, repeatable exercises designed to desensitize triggers, rehearse confident displays, and anchor new facial rhythms. These are small, often 10-minute practices. Performed repeatedly, they rewire habits in a way that makes calm, assertive responses more available when pressure arrives. One of the hardest parts of writing this book was keeping the exercises usable in real life. It is easy to design perfect laboratory drills that fail in hallways, classrooms, and client meetings. I tested every practice in real contexts, and in a range of bodies and temperaments. Some readers will find the first practices feel awkward. That is normal. Change often begins with awkwardness. The work here is like learning to ride a bike. You wobble, you fall, you get back on, and over time the wobble becomes balance. The micro-practices are intentionally small, so you can build momentum without needing a dramatic transformation overnight. Another discovery that surprised me was how much storytelling lives on the face, even in brief interactions. The face narrates confidence, curiosity, boredom, and fear. By changing the pacing, the micro-movements, and the facial storytelling, people could interrupt old fear circuits. That interruption buys the brain time. With a little time, your cognitive resources re-engage, and you can choose a response instead of defaulting to freeze or flee. Readers will learn ways to create that interruption gently and authentically, not by force but by giving the nervous system predictable, calm signals to follow. If you are a manager, a teacher, a lawyer, a parent, or someone who simply wants to show up truer to who you are under stress, this book was written for you. It is meant to be practical, direct, and kind. You will find short chapters that you can read between meetings, exercises you can practice in private, and examples from people I have worked with who found that small changes in their face led to outsized differences in their lives. My hope is that you will use these tools to protect your inner growth, to set boundaries with more ease, and to act in ways that reflect your values rather than your momentary alarm. Thank you for taking the time to read this preface and for inviting these ideas into your life.
Writing Fearproof Face changed me, and I am grateful for every person and every experiment that helped shape it. I am excited for the work ahead of you, and I look forward to hearing which practices make the biggest difference in your day-to-day. With gratitude, Strikey Roy. For House Panther, whose courage and craft made Fearproof Face possible, thank you for believing in this story and for bringing it to life.
Chapter 1. The Fear Face. Why the face betrays us. When someone says one thing and their face says another, the face wins. That is not a figure of speech. The human brain evolved to read tiny facial cues as immediate signs of safety or danger. Microexpressions, those fleeting movements that last a fraction of a second, travel from face to brain faster than any sentence can be formed. They bypass deliberation and trigger automatic reactions long before words register. This chapter shows why that matters and how small changes in facial behavior can change the story you tell about yourself. Consider Maria, a senior project manager who froze during a client confrontation. She had prepared responses, facts, and a clear plan. Yet when the client raised their voice, her jaw tightened, her eyes dropped, and her smile thinned for an instant. The client read those cues as uncertainty, and the conversation shifted sharply against her. Maria did not say she was unsure, her face said it first. That split second decided how other people treated her, and it happened below the level of conscious speech. Neuroscience explains this. The amygdala, a small structure deep in the brain, evaluates quick visual signals and flags them as safe or threatening. Facial microexpressions feed into this system instantly. Mirror neuron networks then copy and amplify what they see. In practice, a flash of panic on one face can spark defensive or aggressive reactions in others, long before language-based negotiation begins. Words matter, but the face sets the baseline of trust and threat. That baseline is the problem for many professionals. In meetings, negotiations, courtrooms, and classrooms, people are judged by snap impressions. Those impressions rely on facial micro-movements, a blink pattern, a lip press, a tightening around the eyes. These cues are automatic, hardwired, and often invisible to the person sending them. The result is a mismatch between inner resolve and outward signal, which makes people more vulnerable to intimidation and less able to assert boundaries. This chapter will unpack how microexpressions operate as rapid threat signals, with simple, actionable steps to catch and alter them. It will present short exercises for noticing the micro-movements that betray fear, methods to interrupt the automatic cascade into the amygdala, and ways to rehearse alternative facial patterns so they become second nature. The goal is not to teach a mask of false calm, but to help readers reset their facial storytelling so their internal growth is protected and their outward presence aligns with their intentions. If the face is the speediest messenger of our emotional state, it is also the most trainable. Small, consistent practices produce predictable changes in how others respond. The remainder of this chapter starts there, with a demonstration you can do in 5 minutes, and a case study that shows the difference between being read as vulnerable and being read as credible. The payoff is immediate. Fewer surprises, clearer interactions, and more control when it matters most. Autonomic arousal, why fear tightens the face and signals submission. Autonomic arousal is the brain and body pressing the panic button, and the face is one of the first places the alarm shows up. When the sympathetic system ramps up, heart rate quickens, breathing becomes shallow, and blood is rerouted to muscles that might run or fight. Facial muscles respond almost instantly, tightening around the eyes, jaw, and mouth. Those micro-tensions are not decorative, they are biological shorthand. Narrowed eyes and a pressed mouth reduce visible motion and make the face appear smaller and less threatening. That shrinkage reads as submission to other people, even when the person inside feels determined. Notice that these cues travel faster than words, and they are read by others as immediate markers of safety or weakness. Quick emphasis. Facial tightening is an automatic, engineered signal, not a moral failing. A less-known piece of the puzzle is the role of the social engagement system, anchored in the vagus and the brainstem, which links facial expression to regulation of the heart and voice. When that system downshifts, people often drop their gaze, slow their blink rate, and dampen vocal tone. Those changes are not just passive consequences, they actively communicate a wish to avoid conflict. In evolutionary terms, signaling submission could reduce harm from an aggressor. It calms the group. Modern meetings and negotiations still trigger the same circuits, so what once saved lives now undermines careers. Quick emphasis, lowered gaze, and quiet voice are biologically social. They are not simply nervous habits. Facial proprioception creates a feedback loop. The body tells the brain what the face is doing, and the brain obeys, amplifying the initial reaction. When someone clamps their jaw or squeezes their eyelids, sensory receptors send signals back to the amygdala and insula, reinforcing the feeling of threat. That is why pretending to smile can sometimes lift mood, and why a flash of fear on the face can deepen into a full-blown freeze. This loop is a double-edged sword. It can lock someone into submission, but it also provides a tangible lever for change.
Quick emphasis: small muscular changes feed the brain, which then shapes emotion. Another subtle point is that facial tightening often functions as a protective filter. Clenching the jaw and narrowing the eyes reduce sensory input from the mouth and vision, which helps the brain focus on one immediate task, like planning a response or scanning for danger. The price for that tunnel vision is a loss of social bandwidth, less eye contact, and less nuanced expression, which others interpret as evasiveness or weakness. Understanding this trade-off reframes some weak behaviors as situational coping strategies, not character defects. Quick emphasis: tightening is protective, but it costs social clarity, practical implication and hope. Because the autonomic feedback is rapid and local, it can be interrupted with equally simple interventions. Slow exhalations, a deliberate softening of the jaw, and raising the gaze by a few degrees create new proprioceptive input that calms the amygdala and signals safety. These are micro-practices that change the loop from inside out. They do not suppress authenticity, they give the nervous system different information. In short, the face betrays fear because the body is doing its job too well, but that same hardware can be retrained to tell a different story. Quick emphasis: tiny, repeatable changes in breathing and muscle position shift the nervous system and the story the face tells.
Chapter 2. Brain Basics for Practical Control. What if the very face you make in a tense moment is deciding your fate before you have a single clear thought? That question sits at the heart of this chapter, because people assume courage and composure are purely moral choices, when in fact they often begin in circuits that operate faster than deliberation. Two systems run the show. The fast brain is the alarm operator, a network of subcortical structures that spots threat, triggers autonomic arousal, and throws up micro-expressions in a handful of milliseconds. It does not consult values or context, it reacts. The slow brain is the planner, the cortex that weighs options, crafts sentences, and edits facial storytelling. The contrast matters, because most visible signs of fear emerge from the fast system before the slow system can catch up. That timing is why people get read as nervous even when they feel composed. The good news is practical and not theoretical. The face is part of a feedback loop. Muscle tightening and breath changes report back to the fast brain, reinforcing the alarm. That loop is a control point. Interventions that act quickly, like a softening of the jaw, a longer exhale, or a small upward tilt of the chin, provide new sensory data that the fast system can use to recalibrate. Those are fast inputs that interrupt the automatic cascade, giving the slow brain a better chance to speak. This chapter maps the biology in plain language, then turns to micro-practices that match the speed of the threat response. Readers will learn why timing matters, how to spot the instant when the loop is vulnerable, and how to insert simple, repeatable actions that shift the outcome. There is no promise of instant transformation, but there is a promise of reliable leverage. Change the face you show first, and the mind will follow. Along the way there will be short case studies and step-by-step exercises to practice under low stakes, so that when a real test comes, the new pattern is already available. One executive learned to break a freeze by pairing a single breath cycle with a softening motion every morning for 2 weeks, and his meetings stopped ending with his silence. That kind of concrete, portable skill is the aim here. Neuroscience translated into habits people can use the moment pressure arrives. Face shapes feeling, embodied feedback, and why micro-expressions matter. Faces do more than send signals to other people. They are instruments of self-sensing. Tiny movements in the brow, lips, and jaw create patterns of muscle tension and sensory input that feed back into the brain, shaping emotion as much as they reveal it. When the brow tightens, the body reads that tightening through proprioception and small shifts in breathing, and the brain often matches the internal state to the outward shape. That loop explains why forcing a small, controlled change in your face can feel like changing your mood from the inside out. Quick emphasis: micro-expressions are not only observable cues, they are internal sensors. Changing them alters what you feel. Most discussions treat micro-expressions as honesty leaks for observers, useful to negotiators and clinicians. There is a less-known practical flip side, which is their role as fast feedback channels to subcortical systems. The face has privileged connections to emotion centers through cranial nerves and brainstem pathways, so a micro-movement gives the amygdala and related circuits immediate high-fidelity information. That immediacy is an opportunity. By deliberately inserting targeted tiny facial adjustments, you can nudge the alarm center before it completes a full fear cascade. Quick emphasis: the face talks to your threat system as quickly as it talks to others. Use that speed to your advantage. This is why timing matters. The fast fear circuit fires in tens of milliseconds, and micro-expressions appear in that window. The slow cortex can only influence the reaction if it gets a different set of sensory facts early on. A small upward lift of the cheek, a softening at the jaw, or a brief smoothing of the brow creates new proprioceptive evidence that the slow brain can then use to reappraise the situation. Practiced repeatedly, those sensory edits change the default mappings between context and reaction, so the nervous system learns a different pattern over time. Quick emphasis: small, early edits to facial feedback change what the brain believes happened. Timing is the lever. There is also a social loop to consider. Microexpressions shape how others respond, and those responses in turn modify your internal state. If your face shows subtle openness, other people tend to mirror that openness or reduce confrontational signals, which lowers interpersonal threat. Conversely, microexpressions of tightness invite escalation or dismissal, reinforcing anxiety. Recognizing this bidirectional influence gives a dual pathway for intervention, internal and social, both of which can be trained. Quick emphasis: changing your face changes the room and then your internal state again. It is a two-way loop. A practical, lesser-known detail is that facial muscles have a dense supply of slow tonic fibers that sustain low-level tension and carry sustained sensory signals to the brainstem. These are different from the quick twitch fibers used for big expressions. Training the tonic layer, through brief daily practices that focus on micro-relaxations and micro-engagements, alters baseline facial tone. In real-world terms, that means fewer accidental tells and more reliable access to calm under pressure, because the brain starts with different input before the moment of threat arrives. Quick emphasis: work the tonic layer, not just the dramatic expressions. Small, consistent practice changes baseline tone. A short case helps. One team leader started a 2-week routine, 3 60-second sessions per day, where she practiced releasing jaw tension and lifting the outer cheek slightly while breathing long exhales. In meetings that used to trigger her freeze response, she noticed fewer sudden flushes of panic and a clearer ability to speak up. The change was not magical, it was mechanical. Different facial feedback, different brain response, different behavior. That is the promise of this approach: practical and repeatable. Quick emphasis: tiny, repeatable practices win over sudden heroics. The face is a practical tool for retraining fear. Immediate physiological levers and realistic timelines for neural rewiring. There are immediate physiological levers that interrupt a fear cascade in the moment, and they are surprisingly simple. Slow, controlled exhales reset the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic tone in tens of seconds. A micro-adjustment in the face, such as a slight softening of the brow or an outer cheek lift, changes proprioceptive input to the brainstem within milliseconds, creating new sensory evidence for the slow, reflective networks to use. A brief posture shift, like lifting the sternum an inch and relaxing the jaw, alters respiratory mechanics and vagal signaling, lowering the rush of adrenaline. Combined with a 1 to 2 second pause before responding, these levers buy time for prefrontal circuits to reappraise the situation. Use them together, and the physiological likelihood of freezing or fleeing drops immediately. Quick practice builds fluency, so these actions become automatic tools rather than awkward maneuvers. Quick emphasis: minor, timed physical edits change internal state fast. Practicing them turns reactive moments into moments you can shape. Rewiring the brain has realistic stage-based timelines that map to how memory and habit systems consolidate change. First stage is immediate state change, which happens in seconds to minutes and is reversible. Second stage is habit formation, where repeated practice over days to weeks shifts default responses through synaptic strengthening and changes in tonic facial muscle tone. Third stage is trait-level adjustment, where frequent context-rich practice over months reorganizes networks and makes new responses the easier rut. Structural changes in gray and white matter can follow sustained practice, typically visible after several months of consistent work. The key is progressive layering, starting with acute levers, adding repeated rehearsal, and then widening practice into real-world contexts. Quick emphasis: seconds change how you feel, weeks rewire pathways, months consolidate habits into durable traits. A common misconception is that neural rewiring either happens instantly or that it is prohibitively slow and permanent. Neither is accurate. You can create immediate shifts in feeling by using physiological levers. Those are real and useful in negotiations or presentations. But lasting change requires repetition and varied contexts, because the brain encodes not only movement, but the situational patterns around it. Think of the process like learning a new social skill, such as active listening, where a single good performance helps, but only ongoing practice makes the behavior reliable under stress. Permanence is not guaranteed, but with periodic maintenance practice, new patterns can become the default for years. Quick emphasis: instant improvements are real. Lasting change needs repetition and contextual practice. Design practice so it maps cleanly onto the timeline above. Micro-sessions of 30 to 90 seconds, 3 to 5 times daily. Train the tonic facial layer and breathing patterns over 2 to 4 weeks. Add context-specific rehearsals, short role plays, or meeting warm-ups twice weekly to generalize the skill into social situations over 1 to 3 months. After 3 to 6 months of consistent layering, expect the new face and pause mechanics to trigger automatically in many of your usual stress contexts. Maintenance looks like brief daily check-ins and occasional focused refreshers, not endless training.
This step plan is practical because it respects both immediate utility and the biology of consolidation. Quick emphasis, short, frequent drills followed by contextual practice is the most time-efficient path to durable change. Practical safeguards matter because changing automatic reactions is adaptive, not cosmetic. Start with public safe exercises such as breathing and micro-relaxations, then progress to controlled exposure in low-stakes interactions before tackling high-stakes confrontations. Track objective signals like reduced jaw tension, fewer interrupted breaths, or more stable voice onset rather than solely relying on subjective feelings. A leader who tracked 3 60-second practices per day reported measurable reductions in throat tightness during stand-ups after 2 weeks, and after 3 months, team members described the leader as calmer.
These practical metrics ensure the biological changes align with real-world behavior and preserve authenticity. Quick emphasis, progress is measurable, incremental, and linked to real behavior, not just feeling better in the moment. Chapter 3. Micro-practices to rewire automatic reactions. Fear shows up on the face faster than words. In a boardroom, a courtroom, or a parent-teacher conference, a tiny tightening at the brow, a swallowed breath, or a quick downward glint at the corner of the mouth gives others a read on inner alarm long before a sentence is finished. Those micro-movements are not flaws to hide, they are patterns that can be changed. This chapter is about the small, repeatable practices that alter those automatic reactions so the face becomes a tool for calm, not a giveaway for vulnerability. Start where change is simple and specific. The micro-switch drill is the core practice here, a one-thing-at-a-time method that replaces a single fear cue with a micro-action that signals steadiness. Instead of trying to overhaul every nervous habit at once, the drill asks the reader to identify one reliable cue, such as brow tightness when interrupted, and substitute a brief, precise correction, such as a 2-second brow soften plus an inward breath. Repetition in tiny doses rewires the reflexive loop, and the brain learns new sensory evidence that supports a different response. An example helps. A mid-level manager named Priya froze in weekly status meetings. Her eyes dropped, then her jaw clenched, and colleagues took over. In training, she learned to spot the first twitch at the eye and execute a micro-switch, a soft exhale, a half-second lift of the chin, and a neutral eye focus. It looked almost imperceptible, yet it interrupted the old cascade. Within weeks, Priya reported feeling less edged. Her team noticed she spoke up more, and the meetings flowed differently because her face no longer signaled retreat before her words had weight. The power of micro-practices comes from timing and specificity. They operate where reflex originates, in half-second windows that are traditionally out of conscious reach. The exercises in this chapter are designed as 30 to 90-second drills, repeated several times daily, paired with short real-life rehearsals. That schedule maps to how neural circuits consolidate new patterns, quick state shifts, frequent repetition, then contextual generalization. Readers will find clear step-by-step variants of the micro-switch drill, each tied to common fear cues like mouth tightness, brow tension, or rapid blinking. These micro-practices are not about masking authenticity or adopting a fixed facade. They are about creating a reliable pause and a different starting point for honest expression. When the face no longer reflexively broadcasts alarm, the prefrontal networks get the seconds they need to choose words and posture that match intention. The result is not a manufactured emotionless exterior, it is a steadier channel for the real self to show up under pressure. Throughout this chapter, exercises are practical, measurable, and safe. Readers will be guided to pick one fear cue, practice the micro-switch until it feels automatic, then add another cue. Case studies and brief role-play prompts show how to transfer practice into meetings, negotiations, and everyday confrontations. Small changes, precisely executed and consistently practiced, produce disproportionate effects on how others read you and how you feel inside. That is the promise and the work of micro-practices to rewire automatic reactions, tempo, anchors, and scheduling, routines to make calm automatic. Think of tempo, anchors, and scheduling as the metronome, tuning fork, and rehearsal plan for a musician. Tempo sets the pace of reactions. Anchors are brief, repeatable cues that fix a desired state, and scheduling is the practice plan that makes the changes stick. When the metronome is steady, the musician stops rushing or dragging. Likewise, when a person trains rhythmically, automatic fear responses slow down and become easier to manage. This trio works together. Tempo gives timing, anchors provide a physical or sensory handle, and scheduling supplies the repetition that builds neural grooves. Tempo is about small timing adjustments that create a pause between stimulus and response. Practice a 2-count inhale, 1-count hold, and 3-count exhale before answering in meetings. Start with the rhythm in quiet moments, then rehearse it in live interactions. The pause is not unnatural, it is a micro window that lets the prefrontal circuit step in. Tempo also includes pacing of speech and movement, slowing micro-expressions that would otherwise flash in and out, making the face a readable signal of calm. Over time, that slowed rhythm becomes the default, automatically lengthening the gap between surprise and reaction. Anchors are tiny, physical cues attached to the tempo that trigger the trained state immediately. Examples include a fingertip press at the base of the thumb, the pressure of feet flat on the floor, or a soft tongue rest behind the teeth. Anchors should be discrete, consistent, and paired with the tempo during practice so the brain links the cue to the calm state. In a negotiation, a single fingertip press at the first sign of jaw tightening can recall the practiced breathing rhythm and soften facial tension. The anchor is not a gimmick, it is a reliable shortcut that interrupts the fear loop and supplies the sensory evidence the slow system needs. Scheduling turns these components into a habit through short, regular rehearsals. Use the 90-second rule, 3 daily micro-sessions of 60 to 90 seconds practicing tempo with the anchor, plus 1 contextual rehearsal in a low-stakes social setting. Track sessions on a simple log, then progressively shift rehearsals into real situations, for example practicing the anchor while role-playing a tough conversation or during routine phone calls. Consistency matters more than duration. Small daily deposits build neural resilience faster than occasional marathon practices. After several weeks, the anchor and tempo trigger automatically, and the schedule can be reduced to maintenance sessions. Practice like a musician warming up, not like an athlete before a match. Warm-ups are brief, focused and habitual. They prime the system without draining energy. If a reader treats tempo and anchors as a daily micro warm-up, calm becomes the default baseline for stressful events. The analogy keeps expectations realistic, progress measurable, and the work sustainable. Start simple, start now. A daily habit of short tempo practice, paired with a single discrete anchor, repeated consistently, produces reliable change. Small routines, precisely timed, make calm automatic. Chapter 4. The Anatomy of a Confident Face. She has just walked into a meeting and felt her stomach drop, yet what the room reads is calm. Her eyes are steady, her forehead relaxed, and her mouth holds a small neutral lift that signals attention, not anxiety. People lean in, not away. That quick slice of social reality is familiar to anyone who has watched someone appear unflappable while the heart races under their shirt. What the face broadcasts in those first seconds shapes how others respond, and often it determines the course of the conversation. This chapter explains what a composed, authentic face looks like, and why those tiny details matter more than grand gestures. A confident face is not a mask. It is a set of micro-movements, pacing choices, and small muscular settings that align internal state with outward signal. When inside and outside are congruent, people sense trustworthiness. When they diverge, micro-expressions leak, and others read vulnerability. The goal here is to make the face an ally, not an accidental informer. Practically, a composed face has a few consistent features. The eyes maintain a steady but flexible gaze, with blinks that are natural and not hurried. The forehead stays soft, avoiding quick furrows that flash worry. The jaw and lips hold gentle tension, enough to suggest resolve without clamping shut. Small, slow facial rhythms replace abrupt twitches, and expression changes are deliberate rather than reflexive. These elements combined create what the brain interprets as calm intent. Authenticity is central. People can tell when composure is rehearsed in a way that feels fake. A confident face allows small, honest micro-expressions that match the emotion, but it prevents those micro-expressions from escalating into signals of submission or panic. In other words, the face communicates what is real, while refusing to betray the inner processes that would otherwise trigger defensive responses in others. Because facial movements feed back into feeling, shaping the face changes the inner state. Slow, controlled micro-movements dampen the fast fear circuitry and buy time for the thinking brain. That is the leverage this chapter offers. Clear, repeatable patterns that interrupt reflexive fear signaling and replace it with composed presence. They are small, trainable, and effective across conversations, negotiations, and public appearances. The next pages map the anatomy of this practical face. Expect simple descriptions of the key muscle settings, the timing that matters, and the micro-practices that convert theory into habit. Readers will leave this chapter with a concrete picture of a confident face, and with the first easy steps to make it their default in pressure. Micro toolkit, jaw cue, soft eye, and measured brow control. Think of the face like a camera lens with 3 simple settings to adjust. The jaw is the tripod, the base that stabilizes everything. The eyes are the focus ring, where attention and warmth converge. The brows are the shutter timing, deciding how quickly a reaction is allowed to read out. When these 3 settings are tuned together, the picture is sharp, steady, and intentional, not jittery or overexposed by fear. The jaw cue is the stabilizer. Many fear responses tighten the jaw until the mouth clamps shut, signaling stress. The micro-practice is small and precise.
Relax the jaw just enough to create a tiny space between the molars, then ease the lips so they rest lightly together. Hold that setting for 3 to 5 seconds whenever a trigger arrives, then return to normal. Over time, the brain learns that tension is not required to stay engaged, and the jaw becomes a quick physical interrupt that stops escalation before it shows on the face. Soft eye is the focus adjustment. Fear often narrows the gaze or makes blinking rapid, which reads as alarm or avoidance. Practice widening the field of view slightly, allowing the eyes to be steady and layered with warmth rather than strained intensity. A simple exercise is to blink slowly twice, then look at a single point and unfold peripheral awareness for 8 seconds. That buffered focus reduces the amygdala response, while signaling calm interest to others, the exact social cue that invites engagement instead of dominance testing. Measured brow control sets the timing of emotional release. Rapid furrows or raised brows are like an oversensitive shutter, broadcasting worry in fragments. Train the brow to move with intention, keeping the forehead soft except when a deliberate expression is needed. A rehearsal habit could be, when a cue occurs, count silently to 2 before allowing the brow to change, if it needs to change at all. That tiny pause gives the prefrontal cortex time to choose a congruent expression, preventing sloppy micro-leaks that betray fear. Quick emphasis, use these settings together. A steady jaw without soft eyes still looks closed, and kind eyes with a furrowed brow can read tense. Tune all 3 in the same rehearsal, and the combined signal is multiplied. Quick emphasis. Short rehearsals win. 2 minutes, 3 times a day, in front of a mirror or during real conversations, builds the camera settings into automatic use. Over weeks, the face becomes a reliable instrument, capturing composure even when the body is working hard behind the scenes. Face as narrative, timing expressions to your words. The face is not just an amplifier of emotion, it is a parallel storyteller that runs on its own timing. Words unfold linearly, syllable by syllable. Facial micro-movements happen in milliseconds and can either anticipate, echo, or contradict the verbal story. Confident communicators learn to align small facial beats with key verbal moments, so the listener receives a coherent narrative, not competing signals. Practically, this means planning where a small lift of the brow, a softened jaw, or a steady gaze will sit in the sentence, and rehearsing those tiny shifts until they fall naturally with the words. A less-known leverage point is anticipatory expression, a micro-gesture placed slightly before a spoken pivot. When a speaker signals an upcoming important phrase with a subtle facial cue, the audience is primed and attention increases. This prepares the listener neurologically to receive the message, reducing the chance that uncertainty or skepticism will fill the gap. Use this sparingly.
Overuse makes the face seem manipulative, but strategic. Tiny anticipations create a sense of control and calm authority. Timing can also be used defensively, by delaying an emotional reveal. Fast facial leaks are habitually read as reactive. Intentionally pausing a half-second before allowing an expression gives the prefrontal cortex time to choose a congruent response. That pause is not coldness, it is regulation. It communicates composure and often reduces escalation in tense conversations because it breaks the automatic had-to-react loop. Practice counting 1 to 2 silently before shifting the brow or mouth when a trigger appears. Another powerful tactic is facial punctuation. Brief, clear expressions that close a statement the same way punctuation closes a sentence. End a decisive line with a micro-smile of confidence, or a slight jaw set, and the face confirms the verbal claim. In contrast, letting facial expressions trail off or contradict the final word creates cognitive dissonance, weakening the message. Make punctuation an intentional habit. Pick one facial marker for endings, another for questions, and rehearse them in cadence with short scripts. Quick emphasis. Time small facial changes to moments of highest informational weight, the words you want people to remember. A well-timed micro-expression punches through noise and anchors meaning. Quick emphasis. Rehearse with audio, not just video. Hearing the rhythm of your speech while practicing facial timing builds reliable coordination faster than watching your face alone. Chapter 5. Rehearsal Strategies and Real-World Labs. When a team leader named Clara walked into a quarterly review and felt her chest tighten, she did not freeze. 2 months earlier, she had rehearsed the exact moment she feared most, a blunt challenge from a senior stakeholder. In a small lab with a colleague, she practiced a 3-second pause, a controlled jaw release, and a soft eye hold while saying, "I hear that, let me clarify." The rehearsal felt awkward at first, then automatic. In the meeting, the cue arrived. Clara's face told a different story than her anxiety. The room followed her calm, and the conversation stayed on course. This chapter turns that kind of preparation into a reproducible system. Rehearsal here is not theatre for vanity, it is training for resilience. The goal is to move confident facial micro-behaviors from deliberate acts to reliable low-attention responses. Readers will learn how to build modular role-play labs, short, focused practice sessions that pair realistic scripts with clearly defined target cues, and an escalation ladder that simulates growing pressure. Each lab is a small experiment in rewiring automatic reactions. Scripts provide the backbone. They are short, replicable scenes that include the verbal content, the likely facial leak, and the ideal micro-behavior to replace it. Target cues are the specific triggers in those scripts, the tiny moments that used to flip the fear switch. An effective lab isolates one cue per run, so the trainee can practice the competing response until it becomes the new default. Escalation ladders then raise stakes gradually, adding noise, time pressure, or a more aggressive tone so the new response generalizes across realism. Practically, labs are modular. Start with a 2-minute script and a single micro tool, such as the jaw cue. Repeat it 10 times in calm conditions, then move to a noisy setting, or add an unpredictable line. Swap in a different micro tool on alternating days. This modular design keeps practice efficient, measurable, and adaptable to different professional roles and cultural contexts. It also preserves authenticity, because the facial changes are small, story-driven, and aligned with the words being spoken. By the end of the chapter, readers will have a simple template. Pick a script, mark the target cue, choose the micro-behavior, and set an escalation ladder. Each lab concludes with a quick reflection and a 1-minute tweak for the next session. Over weeks, these micro-labs produce measurable shifts in timing, tension, and credibility, creating a fear-proof face that protects presence without masking genuine feeling. 3-step video loop: record, annotate, re-record with targets. The 3-step video loop is a compact, high-impact rehearsal routine that turns vague intention into measurable change. Step 1. Record means capture a short run of a scripted lab scenario on video, focusing on the face and upper torso. Step 2. Annotate is a targeted review where the trainee timestamps the exact moment the target cue appears, notes the micro leak, for example a jaw clench or micro look away, and marks what felt automatic. Step 3. Re-record with targets uses those annotations to run the same script while deliberately inserting the chosen micro behavior at the cue, then records again. Repeat the cycle until the intentional micro behavior appears as reflexive as the old fear reaction used to be. A practical tempo makes the loop efficient. Aim for 5-minute recordings and 3 to 5 review passes per session. Short, tight loops reduce cognitive load and increase the number of iterations possible in a week, which is the real engine of plasticity. Use clear labels in the annotation, for example 0:12 jaw release, 0:15 soft eye hold, so you can find and replay precise moments quickly. When time is limited, prioritize the single most intrusive cue, rather than trying to fix multiple leaks at once. One common misconception is that recording yourself creates fake, performative habits rather than genuine change. In reality, video feedback accelerates embodiment. Seeing the split-second mismatch between felt experience and facial signal brings the cognitive slow system into the loop, enabling conscious correction. The visual evidence also resolves a frequent calibration error. People either overestimate how threatening they look or discount microsignals entirely, both of which block targeted retraining. Video closes that gap by making invisible timing visible, which is the precondition for reliable substitution. Use simple annotation rules to keep the loop focused. Annotate only the cue, the involuntary response, and the chosen substitute behavior. Resist the urge to write long narrative critiques. Short bullets work better. Cue, leak, replacement, score, 1 to 5. Score your run immediately, then rerun the script applying only the replacement. This binary practice, see, fix, repeat, trains the brain to detect the cue and execute the competing action without deliberation. A good re-record session treats mistakes as data, not failure. If the microleak reappears, note the exact frame and the context, adjust the replacement if needed, and run again. Sometimes the substitute needs to be more physically incompatible, for example swapping a jaw clench for a deliberate light tongue press behind the teeth to prevent the clench. Small physical incompatibilities are effective because they interrupt the habitual motor pattern and create a clear new association. Quick emphasis: consistency beats perfection. Short, daily loops produce more lasting change than occasional marathon sessions. Quick emphasis: include a 1-minute reflection at the end of each session to capture what worked and plan the next tweak. Graded exposure plans and peer labs for safe desensitization. A graded exposure plan breaks a big fear into a sequence of small, manageable steps, each slightly more challenging than the last. Start by mapping the feared situation from least to most activating, using objective cues like distance, time, or intensity of provocation. For facial fear work, that might mean moving from a neutral conversation to a short disagreement, then to a pointed question, and finally to a sustained challenge. Each step should be rehearsed until the trainee can apply a micro-switch reliably on cue, then only move up when the previous step no longer triggers the old automatic reaction. This staged approach leverages habituation and new conditioning. It reduces avoidance, and it protects learners from overwhelm while building real-world durability. Quick emphasis: small wins compound.
Progress measured in consistent repetitions beats occasional large jumps. Peer labs provide the safe social container where graded exposure becomes practice you can trust. Peers play the roles of provoker, observer, and coach. Cycling through these positions builds empathy and accurate feedback. Set clear safety rules at the start, for example time limits, no personal attacks, and a stop word that pauses escalation if a participant's arousal becomes dysregulated. Use scripted scenarios tied to the graded ladder so everyone knows the cue structure and the targeted micro-behaviors to test. This predictability lets learners focus on execution rather than guessing. Rotate roles in short runs, then run the 3-step video loop for a select pair so the person under pressure gets both live and recorded feedback. Quick emphasis: psychological safety is non-negotiable. A single breach erodes trust and halts progress. Design the escalation ladder with measurable anchors, not vague descriptions, so you can objectively say when to move up or down. Anchors might be the provoker's tone, neutral, pointed, aggressive, proximity, across a table, side by side, or duration of challenge, 15 seconds, 45 seconds, 2 minutes. Combine these with physiological checkpoints like heart rate, breath pacing, or subjective distress ratings on a 1 to 10 scale. Use a return to baseline rule, where the next step is attempted only after the trainee demonstrates 2 consecutive successful runs at the current level. This systematic measurement turns subjective bravery into repeatable skill and makes progress visible to both trainee and coach. Quick emphasis: objective anchors speed learning and reduce second guessing. Feedback in peer labs should be concise, behaviorally specific, and timed to optimize learning. Use the cue, leak, replace feedback frame from the 3-step video loop. Name the cue, point to the micro-leak you observed, and suggest a concrete replacement to try on the next run. Limit feedback to 1 to 2 items per round to avoid cognitive overload, and encourage peers to offer at least 1 positive observation so trainees do not only hear what went wrong. If possible, combine live feedback with a quick playback of a recorded clip. Few moments of visual evidence accelerates recalibration and helps the learner map felt experience to visible expression. Quick emphasis: short, specific feedback beats long critiques. For practical lab rhythm, schedule frequent, short sessions rather than rare marathons. A 30 to 60-minute lab twice weekly allows multiple graded runs, role rotation, and immediate rehearsals with revised targets. Keep a shared progression log for each participant. Record the step level, the micro-behavior used, scores, and one-line notes on what changed. Over weeks, this log becomes the story of competence growth. It also helps the facilitator spot patterns that need targeted drills, such as a persistent jaw clench at mid-level challenges. Regular review sessions can then reintegrate those micro-practices into daily habit anchors, closing the loop from lab rehearsal to real-world application.
Chapter 6. Voice, Body and Face. An integrated presence. When a negotiator enters a room, the numbers on the spreadsheet matter, but the face in front of the table sets the pace. In one negotiation, the borrower had prepared every figure, yet when the lender pushed back, the borrower's jaw tightened, breath shortened, and eyes dropped. Within seconds, the lender softened and pressed harder, sensing submission. A week later, the same borrower returned after practicing 3 simple alignments, and the conversation unfolded very differently. The posture was steady, the breath even, the micro-expression calm but engaged. The lender paused, recalibrated, and the borrower walked away with better terms. That brief, visible shift changed the outcome. This chapter explains how voice, body and face work together to create presence, and why they must be trained together. The nervous system does not respond to isolated signals, it responds to patterns. A steady voice over a tense body feels brittle. A relaxed posture with a fear-cued face reads as inattentive or deceptive. The goal is not to fake confidence, it is to develop congruence, where breathing, posture and micro-expressions tell the same story. Congruence reduces internal conflict, interrupts reflexive fear loops, and makes assertive responses available when they matter. At the center of practical work here is the 3-second congruence check. It is a simple habit to use before any high-stakes moment, a micro-reset that takes 3 seconds and aligns breath, posture, and micro-expression. In practice, it looks like this. Inhale slowly, feel the spine lengthen, and soften the jaw and forehead into an engaged neutral. The breath calms physiology, the posture stabilizes action readiness, and the micro-expression sends a clear social signal. Together they create a coherent signal that the slower cognitive networks can use to override immediate fear responses. Readers will find drills that integrate vocal pacing, brief posture shifts, and facial micro-practices, all built to fit into 2-minute resets and graded exposure routines. Each exercise is brief, repeatable, and measurable, so gains are visible and scalable. The chapter also shows how to layer these skills into the micro-switch framework described earlier, turning a practiced 3-second congruence check into an automatic interrupt for the old fear pattern. Case studies and role-play examples demonstrate predictable patterns. When one channel slips, others compensate, often ineffectively. The training here prevents that slippage by making aligned responses the default.
It teaches how to use the face not as decoration, but as part of an embodied signal that protects boundaries while preserving honesty. For professionals and anyone who faces pressure, this integrated practice provides a reliable way to show up without losing what matters inside. By the end of the chapter, the reader will have a short checklist, 2 quick drills, and a simple practice schedule to start making congruence automatic. Small repeats build neural change. A 3-second habit, rehearsed daily and applied in graded exposures, will steadily convert reflexive fear into practiced presence. The first step is tiny, immediate, and usable now.
Pacing practice. Synchronize facial beats with breath and vocal emphasis. Pacing is the invisible scaffolding that holds voice, face, and breath together. When a facial beat, such as a soft eyebrow lift or a small jaw release, aligns with the exhale and a slight vocal emphasis, the brain treats the signal as a single event rather than conflicting inputs. That unity reduces the need for rapid subcortical threat checks, giving prefrontal networks space to assess and choose a response. Practically, this means a measured exhale, a controlled syllable, and a microexpression timed to land together will feel and look congruent, which opponents read as steadiness rather than stiffness. A less known but powerful effect is the directional role of the exhale. The exhalation phase is when vagal tone rises and the body naturally down-regulates. Placing facial beats on the exhale amplifies calming signals internally because the facial muscles feed back to autonomic centers while the breath is already reducing arousal. Try it, and the immediate reward is twofold. You both calm yourself faster and present a face that supports that calm. This subtle choice of timing is an accessible hack for people who want rapid, credible composure. Tempo matters more than intensity. Fast, strong facial cues often trigger matching automatic reactions in others, which can escalate a tense exchange. Slower, smaller beats, synchronized with a lowered, deliberate syllable, invite others to mirror downshift instead. A brief practice is to speak a sentence twice, first at conversational speed, without deliberate facial timing, then again with a soft jaw relax on the exhale, and a tiny brow ease on the stressed word. Compare how the room shifts between the 2 attempts. Micro-practices make this reliable. Begin with a 2-minute drill. Breathe in for 4 counts, exhale for 5. On the 5th count, release the jaw slightly and drop the pitch of your voice a touch on the final word. Move from single sentences to short paragraphs, keeping the beat consistent. Review the 3-second windows where your face meets breath and voice, and adjust until the events land together cleanly. Repetition embeds the sequence into automatic responses, so it triggers under pressure. Quick emphasis: prioritize exhale-aligned beats over inhale-timed gestures, because the exhale is physiologically calming and supports clear social signaling. Quick emphasis: small, well-timed movements are more persuasive than big, mismatched displays. They preserve authenticity and reduce the risk of being read as performative. Chapter 7. Protecting authenticity while projecting strength. She is in a meeting 5 minutes into a tense negotiation, and her heart is racing. An opponent leans forward, questions stack up, and she feels the familiar urge to shrink her voice and look down. Instead, she breathes, softens her jaw, and lets a deliberate, steady nod follow a short exhale. The room pauses. Her words land. What changed was not the content. It was the face she chose to show, and that face came from a simple, practiced habit that reflected who she wants to be. This chapter focuses on that habit, the small, repeatable actions that anchor a person's core values to the micro-behaviors others see in high-pressure moments. Authentic strength is not a performance. It is a consistent set of signals that match inner conviction. When face, breath, and movement align with values like fairness, curiosity, or firmness, people read credibility, not pretense. The goal here is to protect the inner self while projecting strength that others can trust. Readers will learn how to translate abstract values into concrete facial and bodily cues. A value like respect becomes a soft eye and an even mouth. Courage becomes a brief jaw release paired with steady breathing. Curiosity maps to an open forehead and a tiny lift of the brows on the exhale. By tying each value to a micro-behavior, rehearsal becomes moral rehearsal, not just technique practice. This reduces cognitive friction in real interactions, making authentic responses automatic under pressure. The chapter offers short, actionable drills that embed values into 3-second routines and longer role-play sequences. Exercises are intentionally small, repeatable, and suited for office corners and quick daily rituals. There are also brief checklists for spotting mismatches, so readers can correct a face that betrays discomfort or false bravado before it becomes a habit. Case examples illustrate how leaders used anchored micro-behaviors to shift outcomes. One manager stopped being interrupted by a simple practiced soft eye and measured brow lift that signaled listening and resolve at the same time. A teacher replaced a defensive frown with a paced exhale and a subtle jaw release, which lowered classroom tension and kept authority intact. These are not theatrical tricks, they are value-driven habits that protect the person while changing how others respond. By the end of the chapter, Readers will have a clear way to choose one core value, select two matching micro-behaviors, and practice them in progressively harder settings until they become the default. The promise is practical, less inner compromise, more outward steadiness, and a face that tells the truth about who someone is and what they stand for. Microphrases and facial beats that assert boundaries without sounding rehearsed. Microphrases are short, functional sentences that state a boundary without begging permission or inviting argument. They work because they reduce cognitive load for both parties, creating a clear signal that is hard to misread. Examples include, "I need us to stop there, I can take that later," or "that is not acceptable." Pairing these lines with a facial beat makes them land. A tiny synchronized movement that reinforces intent, such as a gentle jaw release on the final word, a soft eye hold during the core phrase, or a measured brow drop to mark the non-negotiable. The face provides contextual punctuation, turning words into believable decisions rather than canned lines. Timing is everything, and the 3-second routine is the simplest tool to keep the delivery natural. Breathe in, set your posture, then say the micro phrase on the exhale while performing the chosen facial beat. This sequence calms autonomic arousal and aligns voice, face, and breath so the phrase does not sound rehearsed. Practicing this in low-stakes moments, like calling a server to change a meal order, builds the habit of synchronous delivery. After a few repetitions, the combination becomes a reflex, not a script, and the face supports the boundary instead of betraying it. Varying phrasing prevents mechanical repetition and preserves authenticity. Start with a core template, then swap one element each time. For example, changing "I need us to stop there" to "I need a pause here," or "let's pause for a moment." Small lexical changes change rhythm and prosody, which makes the line feel freshly spoken while keeping the intent constant. Likewise, alternate facial beats between soft eye, tiny jaw release, and a brief downward nod so observers notice sincerity, not pattern. Variation keeps the brain engaged, which helps the slow prefrontal system remain in control under pressure. When escalation is required, keep the language layered and the facial beats purposeful, not exaggerated. Move from a simple boundary phrase plus a soft beat to a firmer micro phrase with a steadier jaw and a longer soft eye, to a concise follow-up like, "I asked you to stop," with a slower exhale and a single calm brow lower. Each step increases the nonverbal intensity slightly while preserving composure, so the change is felt as clarity, not anger. This graded approach protects relationships because it gives the other person readable cues and opportunities to recalibrate. Practice drills that feel like real life are the fastest route to credibility. Role-play brief exchanges where the partner counters or ignores the boundary, then repeat until the microphrase and facial beat land with steady breath. Record yourself doing 3 variations, annotate the moments you look away or tighten, then re-record using the 3-second routine. This loop accelerates learning and shows microtells that undermine intent. Keep it small, clear, and connected to an inner value, like respect or fairness. Short lines, matched by small facial beats, protect authenticity because they are easy to adapt and feel honest. Practice, vary, and escalate with intention, and the boundary will be heard as calm strength, not a rehearsed script. Repair rituals to prevent suppression and restore emotional honesty after pressure. After a high-pressure interaction, the face can keep performing the part of composed authority while the inside tightens, tucks away, or numbs. Repair rituals are small, repeatable actions that stop suppression from calcifying into inauthentic behavior. They reconnect the facial story to honest feeling and give the slower, reflective brain time to reappraise. Effective rituals are brief, sensory, and predictable, so they compete successfully with the fast fear circuits that favor avoidance. The goal is not to dump emotion indiscriminately, it is to restore accurate internal signals that guide future choices and preserve credibility without sacrificing composure. Start with a 3-step micro-ritual you can do in under 30 seconds. Step 1. Pause and take 2 intentionally slow inhales through the nose, feeling the belly expand. Step 2. Perform a physical anchor, for example a fingertip press to the chest or a gentle jaw release, which re-establishes muscle feedback and signals safety to the brain. Step 3. Label the experience out loud or in a short mental sentence, saying, "That was tense, I felt pressured but I am okay," speaking on the exhale. This sequence calms autonomic arousal, creates a tactile memory trace for future regulation, and converts an implicit reaction into an explicit, manageable event. A second ritual focuses on short journaling, practiced once after work blocks or difficult meetings. Spend 5 minutes answering 2 prompts, what happened and what I felt, then note 1 small lesson or action. Writing externalizes micro-expressions and restores narrative coherence, which helps the prefrontal cortex integrate the episode and prevent repetitive suppression. Over time, these tiny rites create a pattern of honest reflection, and the face becomes less likely to betray hidden rancor because the person has already acknowledged and processed it.
Social repair is essential when pressure involved another person. It prevents grudges and preserves relationships while maintaining boundaries. Use a 2-line repair script. Name the behavior, state your feeling, and offer a small corrective. For example, when the meeting sped up, I felt dismissed. I want to be heard. Can we pause for 1 minute? Deliver this with a soft eye hold and a steady exhale. This keeps the interaction on the table without escalating and models emotional honesty for others. Quick emphasis point: consistency matters more than intensity. Short rituals repeated daily change the set point of facial feedback and build resilience faster than occasional long releases. Quick emphasis point: keep rituals portable and private. A fingertip press, short breath pattern, or pocket journal entry is enough to prevent suppression and keep the face truthful under ongoing pressure.
Chapter 8. Building a durable public persona. 60% of first impressions form in under 7 seconds, and much of that judgment arrives before a single word is spoken. That quick verdict is driven by the face, the rhythm of breath, and tiny muscle cues that signal confidence or submission. This chapter pulls that blunt fact into a useful problem. If those first seconds matter, then building a public persona that reliably communicates calm and authority is not optional. It is trainable. Daily routines are the vehicle for that training. Small, consistent practices convert deliberate skills into automatic responses, so a composed face shows up without extra thought when situations get hot. The phrase daily routines that cement your fear-proof face captures the core here. Practical habits that nudge fast fear circuits toward new, safer defaults. These are short, repeatable, and designed for real schedules, not idealized training blocks. Readers will see how simple anchors like a 2-breath reset before speaking or a fingertip press after a tense meeting create durable neural traces. The routines combine the micro-toolkit elements readers have learned. They stack onto existing habits, and they scale from private rehearsals to public delivery. A lawyer in one case study replaced her habitual jaw clench with a 3-second jaw release and soft eye routine before courtroom entrances, and within weeks courtroom observers reported she looked both calmer and more persuasive. This chapter focuses on the how, not just the why. Expect step-by-step morning and evening templates, cue-linked 2-minute resets for meetings, and a portable 3-second check that stops mismatch between words and face. Each routine has an explicit training purpose: interrupt fear loops, reinforce facial storytelling that matches intent, and preserve authenticity so the persona remains believable. The emphasis is on sustainability. Short, frequent practice beats rare, intense sessions. The routines here are intentionally modest, so they survive real life. Over time, they change reflexes, reduce the need for effortful control, and make a composed face the default, not a performance. Ultimately, building a durable public persona is less about adopting a mask and more about aligning internal state with outward expression. These daily routines create that alignment. They protect inner growth, preserve honesty, and let courage show up when it matters most.
Scaling your fear-proof persona across roles and setbacks. A durable public persona works when it travels with you, not when it is tied to a single job title. Start by mapping the core elements of your fear-proof face, the small, repeatable micro-behaviors that matter across situations. For example, the soft eye, jaw cue, and 3-second check are portable because they change bodily states quickly and do not require words. For each role you occupy, define 2 role-specific adjustments, such as a firmer jaw for courtroom clarity or a softer gaze for coaching conversations. Practice the base behaviors until they are automatic, then layer the adjustments in brief rehearsals so the new nuance becomes second nature.
Over time, the same nervous system response supports different social goals. You do not relearn from scratch every time you switch contexts. Pick one visible cue to anchor transfer between roles, a tactile touch or brief breath that signals the brain to shift scripts. The cue should be discrete, repeatable, and tied to an existing routine. A project manager might use a thumb press on a ring when moving from status meetings to conflict conversations. That tiny action bridges the learned calm from low-stakes rehearsal into higher-stakes moments, creating contextualized habit transfer without heavy cognitive load. Test the anchor in low-risk environments, then use it intentionally during a role transition to see how reliably it carries the composed state. Small setbacks are inevitable, and the way a person recovers matters more than the slip itself. Build a compact repair ritual you can use immediately after a pressure event, a 5-step sequence that pauses, labels the feeling, applies a breath reset, clarifies one learning point, and reasserts the next small boundary. Treat setbacks as data, not moral failure, and record a single tweak to practice in the next 2-minute reset. Peer labs are especially helpful here, because a calibrated observer can point out whether your micro-behaviors slipped or your context cues failed. Rehearsing recovery turns vulnerability into a reliable training signal and reduces the risk of avoiding situations that would otherwise strengthen resilience. Scaling across roles also requires pruning. Not every micro-behavior suits every setting, and authenticity suffers when a persona becomes an accumulation of incompatible signals. Regularly audit your toolkit, keeping 3 core behaviors that define your composed baseline, then rotate 2 context-specific cues that match your current priorities. This lean approach preserves credibility and simplifies transfer learning. When a new role demands more, run a short graded exposure plan, increasing intensity over days rather than weeks, so the nervous system adapts without producing avoidance. Practice note: pick one role transition this week, choose a single anchor, and rehearse the anchor 3 times before the transition. Then use your repair ritual if the transition does not go as planned. A final assurance with an example. A school principal who moved into district leadership found her classroom calm. The soft eye and measured brow worked there, but they felt hollow in board meetings. She kept her baseline, added a deliberate jaw set, and a brief aligned breath before speaking, and used a thumb anchor when entering the boardroom. After 8 weeks of short rehearsals and a single post-meeting repair ritual, observers reported she appeared both confident and approachable. She felt less drained, and she could pivot between roles without losing integrity. Scaling a fearproof face is not about building a different person for every doorway. It is about shaping a flexible, reliable set of micro-behaviors that travel with the work and learning to recover quickly when they do not. Author's bio. Strikey Roy draws on years of experience helping people confront anxiety and reclaim confidence, blending personal stories with practical tools that actually work. His writing is brisk, honest, and surprisingly warm, mixing psychology, storytelling, and clear exercises to help readers move from fear to action. A devoted student of human behavior and an unapologetic fan of messy courage, he writes to provoke one small brave step at a time.